Good afternoon, Keith Tebow from FRC Media. We're getting ever closer to the November 8th state election, and we're taking time to speak to as many candidates as possible to give you the opportunity to make an informed choice when you go to the ballot box. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Anthony Amore. He's the Republican nominee for State Auditor, and he's actually going to be facing four other challengers in the election in November. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Anthony, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to talk to the people of Fall River.
Yeah, so you ran 4 years ago for Secretary of State, unsuccessful. When I talk to a lot of the statewide candidates, I always like to start our conversation with, unless the candidate is from the region that they're speaking with, a lot of people may not know about who the candidates are. So let me give you a few moments to give us an update on who Anthony Amore is and why you want to be the next state auditor.
Well, perfect. Thank you. I'm Anthony Amore. I'm running for state auditor. I live in Winchester, Massachusetts. I'm familiar with the Fall River area, having grown up until many years ago and spent time in Fall River because I came from Providence, Rhode Island. So I would read the Fall River News in the newspaper when I was a kid. So I'm running for state auditor because I really believe in accountability and transparency at the government level. And there's really no position in state government that speaks to transparency and accountability like the auditor. In fact, the auditor is the chief accountability officer for the state. And in that role, the auditor is responsible for rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in government agencies by doing audits, auditing every state agency every 3 years. So this is something I went to school to do. This is something I've done my whole career. The first half of my career, I've been in the workforce for 32 years. The first half of my career, I spent with the federal government. I worked in immigration, so I really understand issues related to immigrants and our broken immigration system. Then I was a federal agent with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration Security. And then I went on to work with the Department of Homeland Security when it was first formed after the events of 9/11. I was asked to help take on the challenge of rebuilding security at Logan Airport. As your viewers know, the two aircraft that struck the Twin Towers left from Logan. So Logan was a high visibility airport at the time, and it was a high profile position and a major challenge. So we succeeded within a couple of years after revamping security at Logan. Time magazine called us the most secure airport in the country, which was a real accomplishment. After I stood up all of the security screeners at the airport, and I want to make sure I mentioned to you, there were 1,200 employees reporting to me. Then I moved over and took over the compliance and enforcement branch, which is auditing. It's the same thing. So throughout my career in government, I worked on investigations and audits and inspections and assessments. And in 2005, I left the federal government and went over to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, which is the site of the biggest heist of property in the history of mankind. At least $500 million worth of art stolen. And for 17 years, I've been working on the investigation to find this art. Many of your viewers know this is a major case. And I work alongside the FBI and the Department of Justice in that effort. And I also have a company on the side doing investigations and audits and assessments. So the reason I tell you this is because I have led major workforces, big teams of people, and I've been doing the work of the auditor for 3 decades.
Yeah. I want to get into some of the issues now in the campaign. A lot of it's based on the information on your website. And, we'll be giving a link to the website and have you opportunity to give you a link to your website before we finish. But one of the things I found interesting was one of the first things you want to do is actually audit the auditor's office. Where has that been lax over the last few years?
I'm glad you asked that question. So I mentioned that the auditor's office has to perform audits of every state agency every 3 years, and they're not meeting that goal. In fact, the current auditor, who's stepping down in January, has told the media that she misses by about 30%. So only 70% of the agencies are getting audited. She said it's because there's not adequate pay for the auditors. I wonder about that because I know she's never really sought an increase in the budget. So I'm concerned about what's going on in the auditor's office. So the first step is to bring in a completely independent audit team. So look at the auditor's office and see what's going wrong and fix it right away. And then step two, audit the unaudited agencies, because you, the viewers, the taxpayers, need to know how your tax dollars are being spent. And right now, we don't know about 30% of the agencies. So this is a problem. And I'm going to address it on day one. I know how to do this. This is what I've been doing my whole career. And I'm going to bring in a team that knows how to do it too. But again, independent team, not some association I belong to or some team that's looked at the office before. No, some blue ribbon team of experts to say, here's what's wrong, here's what needs to be fixed, and then I will fix it.
Yeah, as a second part of this, you also mentioned that you want to create what's called a waste prevention unit. Would that also help in terms of getting the audits of the other agencies that may not have been audited in quite some time to maybe streamline the process of getting those done and finding potential waste in departments across the Commonwealth?
Oh yeah, well listen, the rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse is the number one job of the state auditor, and I will focus on that like a laser every single day. That's my passion. It's what I studied in graduate school. It's what I've done my entire career is investigations, and I will be dogged in pursuing waste, fraud, and abuse. But waste prevention unit will be really focused on how we can improve problems on problems that we're finding. So when I was with the federal government and we would find problems at Logan Airport after 9/11, we wouldn't just point fingers, write a report, and walk away. No, we were doing constructive engagement. We would work hard to fix problems because at the end of it all, what the people of the Commonwealth want is a well-operating government. They don't want finger pointing. They don't want politics and name calling. The politics of division have really impacted people in America, and they're sick of it. And same here in Massachusetts. So my waste prevention team will work really hard to root out these problems and fix the root causes of these problems.
Now, one of the areas we had the opportunity to speak with the Democratic candidate Senator DiZoglio a few weeks ago, and one of the items on her agenda is to actually audit the state legislature, and I believe that's something that you would like to do as well. Talk about your plan in terms of auditing the legislature and what they do.
Well, I would like to, but I've taken issue with Senator DiZoglio mentioning this because the fact of the matter is the auditor doesn't have the authority to do so. And
Mhm.
the current auditor, Suzanne Bump, who endorsed Senator DiZoglio, has said the same thing. And I don't quite know why Senator DiZoglio keeps talking about this, but my suspicion is that she doesn't have the experience in this role. So my point is this: you can say you want to audit organizations, but if you don't have the authority, the day you go to do the audit and you ask them to open the books, they just say no. And how do you do the audit? You have to work towards getting the authority. You need enabling legislation, right? And we don't have that right now. It wasn't just Suzanne Bump, it was Joe DiNucci before her, who was the auditor for 28 years. Both of them said you don't have the authority. And I think it's great. I would love to audit the legislature. The way it works in Massachusetts now is they audit themselves, and the public is not privy to the results of those audits because they're not subject to public records requests. That's an abomination. We're the only state in the country where the executive, the judicial, and the legislative are exempt from public records. That needs to change. So I would work towards getting the enabling legislation to audit the legislature, not saying I'm going to based on a lack of understanding how these things work. And I think that Senator DiZoglio is showing that she doesn't really understand the elements necessary to do an effective, useful, consequential audit.
Yeah. You mentioned about being more transparent, and the auditor's office can play a role in that. Expound about that, if you will, in terms of how, as auditor, you would like to make not only audits more transparent, but also some other information that is under the purview of the auditor to make the state more transparent in terms of information to the public.
Sure. Look, the auditor has two major roles. One is the fact-finding investigations they do to find problems and root them out and make corrections. Number two is the bully pulpit, which means you're the chief accountability officer. You have to make sure that the government is accountable, not to me, but to the people, to you and the taxpayers. So that means taking this information and telling the people what we're finding. Okay, the people need to know. That's how our government works. That's what it's structured upon. Government of, by, and for the people. So I will use that bully pulpit in ways like we're doing right now. So I think you can't just take information to the Boston Globe and to WBUR and then walk on, or WBZ. No, what you have to do is go to community outlets like yours, other ones around the area, talk radio in local areas, community newspapers, community radio shows, community meetings. I think government fails when it waits for people to come to it for information. I think government needs to get the information out. And there's a saying that I really like, and that is, where there's light, in other words, when the auditor is shining light on a problem, where there's light, there's heat, and where there's heat, there's action. So that information that the auditor can get out to the people is essential in affecting change in government.
Yeah. A lot of times on some of these statewide races, people will look, and I've said this too, and I interviewed the candidates, both the Democratic candidates during the primary season. And I'll ask you the same question. A lot of people will look at the auditor and their eyes may gloss over because they're not quite sure what he or she does. And we're having a conversation about what you would do, obviously.
Mhm.
But in a city like Fall River, a gateway city, blue collar community, people trying to make ends meet, not only in Fall River, obviously the entire Commonwealth. What can you say to people, let's say in gateway communities where, they may not have the income as some of the suburbs around Boston, and how an effective auditor you can be for a gateway city like a Fall River?
Oh, that's such a great and important question. The gateway cities like Fall River are so important to the fabric of Massachusetts. And it's the people who have the least to spare that are on my mind when I think about running for auditor, because the auditor is protecting the money that they have to give, the non-discretionary spending in the form of tax dollars that the blue collar workers of Fall River have to pay. They don't have a choice about it. Meanwhile, all of their other costs are increasing right now by 8.3%. And worse than that, groceries are at 13.4%. So at all of this time, the blue collar workers of Fall River are seeing their salaries, their real wages, decreasing. So there's this massive gap between what they can afford and what they have to spend. What I think is, and what they're bringing in, and what I think is important, is that the auditor really realize when he's doing or she's doing their work that the tax dollars of these individuals are so precious, because this is money they can't spend on groceries or car payments or rent. They can't spend on their kids' school clothes, etc. So I think that the people that feel it the most should be the most important people to the auditor, because it's their livelihood. It's their money that's being spent. And if it's being wasted, someone needs to blow the whistle on that. And I'm the person that knows how to do it.
Yeah. I want to go over a couple of other items on your website. Again, we invite people to check out all the information, all the issues that you feel is important to the campaign. One that I haven't heard much about was auditing of state colleges and universities, the UMass system. You mentioned, I believe, that building a dorm in one location, was the cost of that was different than another. And obviously, higher education is very important. We're coming to you. I don't know if you know this. Our studio is actually located at Bristol Community College, one of the 15 community colleges
Yes.
across the Commonwealth. So, how do you look at auditing those entities, and how can that translate to maybe making it easier for residents to get an education here in Massachusetts?
Thank you for asking that. So, one thing that everybody can agree on, no matter where you stand on the political map, it's that the cost of higher education is out of control, and for many, it's prohibitive, and we need to take action on that. So, I am a fan of the UMass system. My younger daughter is getting a master's degree there now. She just finished her undergrad and loved every minute of it. However, people of Massachusetts need to know, where are the tuition dollars going and where are the tax dollars going? And I don't think they know. And I think when I walk the campus, I see construction all the time. But then when I look at enrollment at UMass, I see that from 2014 till now, it has gone down every single year. And as a parent, a UMass parent, I can tell you that tuition went up this year 2.5%. So why? Where is this money going? If enrollment's dwindling, why do you need more money? Do we need more dorms? And why do they cost what they do? Why is it more expensive to build, as you mentioned, a dorm room at UMass Boston than it is, I don't know, 12 miles down the road at Salem State College, right? The same labor fees. Why? I understand the real estate costs, but why is the construction so vastly different? We need to know this, right? There's a lot about the UMass system that should be looked into. Maybe it's fine, but we need a watchdog, right? We don't need a lapdog. Massachusetts is completely run by Democratic Party. Come January, it's probably going to be all Democrat, except for the auditor, if I'm able to win. And we need someone that can speak the truth to power there, not in a way where there's animosity, but in a way that there's constructive friction amongst the branches of government in the departments. So I will look at, for instance, why are the vast majority of the salaries in the top 100 salaries in Massachusetts for state workers, why are they almost all at UMass? Why did the UMass sports teams lose $50 million per year, right? Maybe there's a positive return on that. I'd love to see it. I think the people would want to know. So I'm really going to sharpen pencils on state colleges and universities to make sure that the people of Massachusetts that attend these schools, our kids, our colleagues are getting the most bang for their buck, and that tax dollars and tuition dollars are being spent responsibly and within the law.
Yeah. I want to ask you a couple of questions on at least two of the upcoming statewide ballot questions. The first one, question one, in terms of the proposal, which actually would change the state constitution to add an additional 4% tax on those earning $1 million a year. How do you view that? And as an auditor, how would you view that issue if it were to pass?
Well, my instinct on the issue is that we're looking at a year in which we have almost $7 billion in surplus tax money or surplus money. In fact, we have $2.94 billion in excess tax money that has to go back to the people because of the Section 62F law that says when tax revenues exceed income by a certain amount, the difference has to go back to the taxpayer. It was my campaign that took the lead in holding people on Beacon Hill accountable to get that money back as soon as possible and in the form of rebates. Governor Charlie Baker and I agree wholeheartedly on that. So we're the ones that worked on getting this money back. Now, when you have a surplus of this size and you see that people are overpaying, my first instinct as a data analyst would be, well, why are we looking to bring in more tax money when we've just brought in $3 billion more than we need? And we have more to give back, right? We're hoping that the legislature will pass a bill to give back another $1 billion to people. So why do we need to raise taxes on anybody? And what are the impacts? What is the impact on raising taxes on millionaires? Millionaire is not what it used to be. And there's a lot of different definitions of a millionaire. So we want to be cautious about saying, well, let's point fingers at people who fall under the term millionaire and say they need to pay more money back when we are already completely awash in money. We don't have a tax revenue problem. If we ever have a deficit, it's a spending problem. But the auditor's the person who's best positioned to monitor these things. And lastly, I will say, some people call what we're in right now a recession. Some people say it doesn't fit the definition. It doesn't matter what you call it. Where people are hurting right now, and they're hurting in a major way, and it's not getting better. And I can tell you this, there's no precedent for taxing your way out of a recession or out of an economic downturn. There's no precedent for doing that. Increasing taxes, you can't tax your way out of recessions. So I'm dubious about the so-called millionaire's tax.
Yeah, the other question I want to ask you about is question 4, which is the granting of licenses to undocumented individuals who are coming to the Commonwealth. That was passed by the legislature. Question 4 will ask people whether they support it or don't support it moving forward. But your tack, based on your website, was not necessarily yes or no on that, but the ability of actually the registry of motor vehicles to actually handle that potential influx of more driver's license in the Commonwealth. Talk about that.
Thank you so much for picking out the finer points of my platform. I really mean this. I appreciate it. So When I first introduced myself, I mentioned that I worked for immigration for 5 years at the beginning of my career, and I was an inspector, and I would look at documents of refugees and immigrants and visitors. And one thing I can tell you is that there's no uniformity, right? It is a very hard job for the people from Customs and Border Protection to look at a passport from Chile and a passport from the Philippines and know which one or if both are legitimate. And then there's travel documents on top of that. Now, with the way the law is structured, when a person who is not a US citizen goes to the registry, they are allowed to present a myriad of different documents, including consular cards, original birth certificates. But I would ask you, that sounds great, right? But I would ask you, on top of all the duties the people at the RMV have to do. My opponent said that the RMV was incompetent. She said it was a place where bureaucracy is just run amok. And we've all been to the RMV and seen all the work that the people there have to do. It's a very hard job. Now we're going to say to them, hey, I want you to look at this consular card from Guyana and this birth certificate from a town in Scotland and say, these are legitimate documents, and I'm going to issue a driver's license based on this, which will allow a person maybe to register to vote. And I think that you have a problem there because you're putting too much of a burden on people who aren't experts in foreign documents, and even CBP at the airport, who does this for a living, who go to an academy for 9 months to learn to do this specifically, have problems, and they have to send documents off to be checked by experts. So to say to a person at the RMV, it's up to you, to look at this travel document from Serbia and say, yeah, this is authentic. Let's issue a driver's license. Now, I might be taking up too much time, but I just want to make a finer point.
Sure.
I believe that undocumented people in the United States and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts should, though, have a driver's privilege card, which was something that Senator Bruce Tarr introduced. It would meet both missions. On the one hand, law enforcement would know who the people are who are driving cars, and we'd have some confidence about them too. On the other hand, we always have to remember, and I really mean this, there's a big immigrant community in Fall River. Immigrants are people. They're not numbers on a spreadsheet. They're not a problem. Immigrants are human beings. They're individuals with hopes and dreams and families. We have to treat them like human beings with dignity. So I don't believe they should have no document to drive. I believe they should. I just think it should be an interim measure. I am very much opposed to targeting people who are here illegally and pointing to them as some sort of enemy or the cause of all our problems in Massachusetts or in this country.
Yeah. A couple of other quick items before we sign off and let you go, and actually give you another opportunity to give your pitch directly to the voters of Fall River. You've been endorsed by Governor Baker, the only statewide Republican, I believe, that has gotten his endorsement. Do you think that'll help?
I do. I think people in Massachusetts, well, we know people in Massachusetts respect and like Charlie Baker. His approval rating is 3/4 of the people in the state think he's great. It's as high as can be. He's the most popular governor in the country for a reason, and we think alike, and that's why he's endorsing me and just me. We have the same view of government. We believe that you have to be hard on problems and soft on people. We both believe that government shouldn't be about passions, butting heads, and finger pointing, and ideologies clashing all the time. It should be about delivering good government to the people of Massachusetts, because that's what your viewers want. They have no interest in hearing me or anyone else argue with other politicians. They just want to know, is their family safe? Can they put food on the table? Can they keep a roof over their heads? Will their children get a good education? Will they age with dignity as they get older? These are the things they care about, not this finger pointing and these political arguments that seemingly have no end. So Governor and I are on the same page with this. And finally, as he said, he believes I'm the most qualified person to run for auditor, not just this year, but in the past. So I take that with a great sense of honor.
Yeah. One other item, just to let people know, this interview that we're having will run on our platform between now and election day. So, and we're actually recording this toward the end of September. As of right now, I believe, unless something has changed recently, There are no set debates for this race that have been officially set up yet. Speaking with Senator DiZoglio, she's willing to debate, but she also would like to have the other three candidates in a race also join you and her in that debate. You feel that you'd like to go one-on-one with the senator. Tell us why you wouldn't want to have the other candidates in a debate.
Well, I would say that not all of the other candidates want to be part of the debate, and this is a fact. I can tell you, the Libertarian candidate doesn't want to partake in a debate. I understand what Senator DiZoglio's message has been, but frankly, it's a dodge. She doesn't want to debate me one-on-one. She knows I have the experience that she can't match. She knows that I know what an auditor does in a way that she doesn't, and she just doesn't want to debate me one-on-one. But we pushed and pushed and pushed, and the media said, this is ridiculous, you need to do it. So she finally agreed to one with John Keller, which will be just 25 minutes, and there'll be a commercial break, and it'll be edited down to 10. I think that she needs to do more debates than just one. I think she needs to let people see the difference between us. And frankly, I think she's had a really honorable career in the legislature. I do. I'm not just saying this. I think she's an honorable person. But she knows that her experience doesn't measure up to mine, and that's why she doesn't want people to see this in action. So I hope that she'll agree to more debates in different parts of the state. We asked for one down on the South Coast, as a matter of fact. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. As we wrap up here, I want to give you the opportunity. I do this with all my interviews as we head to the election, to give you about a minute or so to speak directly to the people in Fall River and why they should consider Anthony Amore to be our next state auditor.
Well, thank you. And thank you for viewing, and thank you for listening to me. Listen, the reason I think that you should vote for me is very simple. It's experience. You know, I've been doing this work for more than 30 years. My opponent has never, ever done this work, and she has never led an organization. Experience matters. You need somebody who can do the job on day one, not learn the job, on the job training in the position. The other reason I think you should vote for me is I want you to think back to when you were first learning about American government, right? Checks and balances are important. And if I'm not elected, Beacon Hill will be strictly Democrats. And even Democrats will tell you that's not good for democracy. It's not good for you or for government to have no checks and balances on a majority party. And I mean that if it was Democrat or Republican. One party rule is not good for taxpayers. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for Massachusetts. I'm the person that can bring you checks and balances. I'm the person with the experience, and I really want to do this. I want to be auditor. This is not a stepping stone for me. I want to be your next state auditor. Thank you.
All right. Republican nominee Anthony Amore running for state auditor. I appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to the people in Fall River, and hopefully we'll catch up again at a later day. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you for joining us here at FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. Please make a point to vote on November 8th.